Meta is one of the early pioneers in the AI space, in particular around open weight models. The Llama line kickstarted a revolution in these open AI tools and technologies that allowed for everything from Grok with a Q to Llama, the tool you run locally, to really start to flourish. I can't imagine where we'd be today without Meta's contributions to AI, but at the same time, it kind of feels like they got screwed. There are now way better open options like Qwen or DeepSeek. There's more innovation than ever, and on the production side, there's a ton of innovation going on. And it feels like they've just kind of fallen behind. Or have they? The release of Llama 4 is interesting. It just dropped and has some really cool characteristics like the absurd 10 million token context window. And it's still open weight, so you can download it and run it on whatever machines you want, but there are catches there too. It's a very interesting model with a lot of catches, and as I first was filming this intro, the Grok 3 API came out because everything is just moving so fast. I can tell I have some crazy bills to pay for all of this inference, so we need a quick break for today's sponsor, and then we'll get right to it. I don't know about you guys, but my team's been shipping way more code due to all these awesome new AI tools, but there's a new bottleneck as a result. Well, it's not that new, but it's extra painful now. Code review. I cannot tell you how frustrated I have been getting with GitHub. It's driving me mad and it's holding our team back so much. I would estimate like 30% of my time is spent fighting weird bugs in GitHub, just trying to read and review some code. Today's sponsor is Graphite, and they're here to solve all of this. I could literally rant for days about how much I love stacked diffs and stacked PRs. There's a reason this workflow is what they use at big companies like Facebook. Facebook likes it so much they don't even use Git. They use Mercurial just for stacking. But now you can have it on top of your GitHub. Yes, this all works as an integration on top of GitHub. I personally think the stacked PR stuff by itself is enough. That's why a bunch of other teams have moved, including Vercel. But honestly, I've been moving over because the code review flow is much nicer. This PR here has a ton going on, over 70 files, and my browser's not lagging at all. If you've ever reviewed a big PR in GitHub, you know how insane that is. There's a lot of other niceties too, like hotkeys for quick things like opening and closing sidebars, actual feedback loops built into it, the idea of splitting a PR into multiple pieces so that you can have a big PR in chunks without having to split it across 15 pull requests. All awesome by itself, but you still have to review it yourself. Or do you? Graphite just introduced Diamond, which is their AI code reviewer, and it's the missing piece that pulls all of this together. Diamond knows your code and will hop in and give actual useful feedback for code review. It also provides suggested changes. So here, there's an isEven function that isn't actually checking if it's even, it's a bad code, and the reviewer caught it and can auto-apply. I can just hit add to batch, commit suggestion, get it going, and I can give it a thumbs up and thumbs down in order to train Diamond on my code bases and what our preferences are. What's even cooler about Diamond is the pricing. It's free for up to 100 pull requests per month. That's insane. I ship a lot of code, but 100 PRs is a serious number per month to just get for free. Honestly, I'm so into AI code review at this point that I can't imagine not taking up this deal if you're not already using an AI code reviewer. It has fundamentally changed our workflow and meaningfully reduced the number of bugs we're shipping to prod. Any one of the features I just talked about would make this a useful product that is so much better than GitHub. The fact that all of these things are on one platform is still kind of crazy to me. Thank you to Graphite for sponsoring today's video. Check them out today at soydev.link/graphite. The Llama 4 herd is 3 different models, Behemoth, Maverick, and Scout, all varying a lot in size. You might also notice the date here, April 5th. This model came out on a Saturday. I was expecting this model to take up until the next LlamaConf, which is the conference that Meta runs around AI stuff, much later in the year, like June if I recall. This drop was much earlier than I expected. And I don't think I'm the only one who was surprised at how early this came out, because Meta themselves on the GitHub PR to release this, in the actual Git commits, you see the change from the 7th to the 5th. They went from planning a launch on a Monday to just randomly dropping it on a Saturday. They clearly were scared of something that is coming. Or they're accelerating it because of that weird anonymous model that just dropped a few days before. There's a lot going on here. It's going to be very interesting. Some people suspected that anonymous model was them. And if you're not familiar, we actually have it on T3 chat, the Quasar Alpha model. This model just appeared on OpenRouter. We immediately added it to T3 chat. We still don't actually know what it is, but there's a lot of speculation. I can say with 100% confidence, having seen the outputs, this is not one of the Meta models. I am positive about that. So for any of many reasons, Meta somewhat rushed this launch to get it out on a Saturday. Real quick thing, I had a brain fart when I was doing this. I mixed up multimodal and mixture of experts. I always forget multimodal is just it can handle different things. So things like text, images, video, audio. Multimodal means it can handle different things with just one model. Mixture of experts is the thing I'm talking about for most of the section, where I talk about how the parameters are split across different things. Want to include this clarification rather than be wrong in the video. Anyways, their focus is on multimodal intelligence, which means it has a ton of tokens that are different clouds of words to map things correctly to figure out how to go from one set of tokens to the next token. But if you have 2 trillion tokens of data, most of it's not relevant to the specific task you're trying to solve. Some of it might be more relevant for science. Some of it might be more relevant for coding. Some of it might be more relevant for math. Some might be more relevant for history. This idea of a multimodal model is that you have way more parameters than are actually activated during the traversal to generate the next output. So in the case of something like Scout, you have 16 experts, which are the different sections within those parameters. And when you actually run the model, it will only activate up to 17 billion of those pieces. The other phrasing for describing this stuff is MOE, which is mixture of experts. These models have different experts distributed across sets of these tokens so that you can use the part that's important. If I was to diagram this out quick, you could imagine you have tons of these dots, and all of these dots are different bits of information, words, tokens, whatnot. And imagine we have literally billions of them, which clearly we don't here, but you get my point. So we have this pile of information. They all have links between them pointing to and from different areas. Traditional models would just access the whole thing, which means it would have to traverse all of this data to figure out what the next token is. But if you only need the bit that's focused on code, a good mixture of experts model could just focus on this area and ignore the rest. This is what makes these models with just insane numbers of parameters viable now. It's also a big part of what made the DeepSeek stuff so cool, is they really, really figured out this multi-model stuff. Maverick having 128 experts is kind of nuts, because that means you're still only scavenging across the same 17 bill parameters, but it can do a much wider variety of things, so to speak. We'll see how that comes out in the performance side, though. As they say here, Scout is a 17 billion active parameter model with 16 experts. It's the best multimodal model in the world in its class, and it's more powerful than all previous generation Llama models, while still fitting into a single H100 GPU. Scout also offers industry-leading context window of 10 million tokens, and it delivers better results than Gemma 3, Gemini 2.0 Flash Lite, and Mistral 3.1 across a broad range of widely reported benchmarks. This is where I personally started to get suspicious, because Gemma 3 is Google's open model that's iffy in quality. Mistral 3.1, you guys know how I feel about Mistral now. I don't trust those guys for fucking shit. And Gemini Flash Lite. This is particularly interesting if you know how these things are priced. Gemini 2.0 Flash is very, very cheap. It's 10 cents for a million input and 40 cents for a million output. Flash Lite is cheaper, but not much. It's like 25-ish% cheaper. The only reason you say Flash Lite instead of Flash in a post like this one is because you are much worse than standard Flash. Flash Lite is surprisingly good at stuff like image summarization. You give it an image and it'll tell you what it's of. It's really good for context condensing. We use it for generating titles in T3 chat, but we could switch between Flash Lite and Flash and it wouldn't make a meaningful difference. These two models are so close in characteristics and price that I've historically been kind of confused why Flash Lite even exists when Flash is already so cheap and fast. I now feel like the only role that Flash Lite has is as a benchmark and a punching bag for a model that might not be very good, like Scout. The fact that Meta's publishing a new small model today that performs that much worse than Gemini 2.0 Flash, that they have to cite Flash Lite as the comparison instead, is funny. It gets even funnier when we look at how these benchmarks work, because it might not even be better than Flash Lite. And then there's Maverick, which is a 17 billion active param model with 128 experts. It's the best multimodal model in its class, beating 4.0 and Gemini 2 Flash across a broad range of widely reported benchmarks. 4.0 and 2.0 Flash are very different models. Saying you beat both is bold. We'll see how that goes for you. Apparently, the results are comparable to the newest version of DeepSeek v3 on reasoning and coding. This is also a funny call out because we've known for a bit that DeepSeek kind of melted the whole AI department within Meta, because they had gotten way better performance without having the massive amounts of compute that Meta has. Meta kind of bet really, really hard on just building gigantic server farms with tons of GPUs. DeepSeek didn't have that, and they still were able to make better models. So it's fun to see them cited here because we know that DeepSeek has just infected the brains of everybody there and resulted in tons of meetings and departures and shifts in Meta's everything internally. They said that the results are comparable at less than half the active params. Interesting. They also apparently offer the best-in-class performance-to-cost ratio with an experimental chat version scoring ELO of 1417 on Llama Arena. Apparently, the reason models are so good is that they're distilled from Llama 4 Behemoth, which is the 288 billion active param model with, what was the total number there? 2 trillion tokens, just absurd numbers. They claim that Behemoth outperforms 4.5, Sonnet 3.7, and Gemini 2.0 Pro on several benchmarks. 2.0 Pro isn't very good. 2.5 Pro is insane. I'm sure it's not going to beat that, especially as it's a thinking model. And none of this is reasoning, by the way. We still don't have a reasoning model for Meta. I do love they're still publishing on llama.com and Hugging Face. Like, they were early on publishing the way that the community expected. And it was kind of crazy initially being on Hugging Face and seeing something from official like Facebook team. But before we can dig into the model, which, by the way, if you want to play with it, new models available on T3 chat as soon as they are reasonable to access. So we have Scout and Maverick both available now, ready to go if you want to try them. I have not personally been super impressed. I could talk a lot more about how these models are trained and how they handle things in post. I like they're putting cost estimates because, again, remember, it's open source. So this is based on what they think it will cost when they put it in different places. But these benchmarks don't really line up with what people have seen. The long context stuff seems really cool, that it can handle such large amounts of data, but how does that end up working in practice? There's a benchmark for retrieving data from long context. And this benchmark actually saw Llama 4 Scout having the worst score on the entire page because they, on the 60K token context test, just couldn't get any of the answers right. 11% accuracy. Which is hilarious when you realize this is the model meant to do large context well, and it chokes harder than anything else in this entire chart at 60K. And it somehow recovers on the 120K test. I don't know what's going on there. But compared to like 2.0 Flash, which is really good at retrieving things from context, the gap here is hilarious. And 2.5 Pro, 90% at 120K, Scout's at 15. Yeah, actually really, really bad. And funny enough, worse than Llama 3.3, which admittedly had a smaller context window, but still kind of funny. Yeah, it still seems very clearly like Google is the king of large contexts. Even though the number is bigger, these scores are much worse. This also lines up well with this experiment that Andy Kamath over at BrowserBase did recently, where he measured retrieval from large HTML files across all the different models. And what was really interesting about this is the best was not even the new Gemini Pro models. It was Gemini 2.0 Flash, which is really funny if you saw my recent videos about Gemini stuff, because I've been dumping HTML pages into Gemini and getting it to parse data and links and things for me, and it has been really good. Crazy to think that it's this much better than the alternatives right now, but it is from my experience. And that combined with the million token window is nuts. Maverick, which is the better new Llama 4 model, is still only hitting 82% when that's at 90%. And the Scout model is only 65%. So it seems pretty weak at retrieving things from context, which is concerning because that's one of the things the model is supposed to be good at. This is also one of those benchmarks that confirms that 3.5 was a lucky roll because it's way higher than the other Claude models. So as you can see, the benchmarks are not showing the performance that they kind of were promising. And now there's a whole conspiracy that Meta's benchmarks were kind of faked some amount. It's gone so far that a couple employees have actually quit over it. They said in their announcement that that really good Llama Arena score was using an experimental chat version. A chart on the official Llama site, meanwhile, discloses that Meta's Llama Arena testing was conducted using Llama 4 Maverick optimized for conversationality. Llama Arena's never been a particularly reliable way to measure performance, but they've never seen an example before of a company, especially a big one like Meta, going out of their way to game it. And it seems like they very much did here by tailoring a specific model version for that benchmark, withholding it, and releasing a separate vanilla variant of the same model. So it's really hard for us to replicate the tests that they did there. Here is what is supposedly an ex-employee describing why they quit on a Chinese forum. This is an English translation, by the way, so might not be perfect quoting, have it perfectly validated, worth understanding though. After repeated training, the performance of the internal model still failed to reach the open source state of the art. It's even far from it. The company's leadership recommends mixing each benchmark's test set in the post-training process in order to be able to communicate across the metrics and produce a look as it may result. So not the best translation, but very clearly trying to train on outputs from these benchmarks to make a better score come out. The goal is not reached by the deadline set at the end of April. The consequences will be unimaginable. The release of Llama 4 yesterday, many people on X and Reddit already measured very poor results. Someone who is also in academia at the moment, I can't accept this approach. Therefore, an application for separation, resignation, has been submitted, and it has been made clear that my name will not be signed in Llama 4's technical report. Meta's VP of AI also resigned for the same reason. Pretty crazy. Meta has responded here. We're glad to start getting Llama into all your hands. We've already been hearing lots of great results people are getting with the models. That said, we're hearing some reports of mixed quality across different services. Since we dropped the model as soon as they were ready, we expected it would take several days for all the public implementations to get dialed in. We'll keep working through our bug fixes and onboarding partners. We've also heard complaints that we trained on test sets. That's simply not true, and we would never do that. Our best understanding is that the variable quality people are seeing is due to needing to stabilize implementations. We believe the Llama 4 models are a significant advancement, and we're looking forward to working with the community to unlock their value. Bold statement. Curious to see if this ends up playing out. It's honestly hard to say right now because there's a lot of words being thrown in each and every direction. Very interesting. TinyGrad commented on this drama too, and I generally trust them when it comes to these things. They claim that there's no way this is true because no major lab would ever be that dumb. I think a lot of the perceived badness of Llama 4 comes from broken implementations or bad quantizations. MOE is hard to get right. I suspect it's fixed over the next few weeks and it's on par with a model of these benchmarks. Hopefully. It is of note that Meta is one of the few companies that doesn't release their model alongside an API to use it with because they let the community do all of that. Whenever Meta puts out a new model, the companies that make a lot of money aren't Meta. It's companies like Together and Grok with a Q that can now deploy these models on their infra and sell it to companies like me using them for T3 chat. $8 a month, by the way. So it makes sense that these deployment partners might not have set up Llama 4 correctly. These MOE models are really hard to deploy. We've seen this with DeepSeek, where almost every other provider that isn't the official DeepSeek API has been way slower and often performs worse in general. So I'm coming around. The controversy seemed real. This statement has me more confident. I trust George's take on these things. It's also interesting because Ella Marina is users vote on which answer they prefer. In this example, users voted for Llama 4, even though Claude's answer is both factually accurate and way less, ranty. Very interesting. Very interesting. I do want to showcase its strengths a little bit quickly here. So I have a fresh instance of T3 chat open, Llama 4 Scout set, solve advent of code 2021, day 3 in Python. As you see, it's fast as hell, especially on Grok, which is our deployment partner for using these models. Grok has been awesome to work with. I love those guys. But the speed of that output is pretty nuts. I'll run it again so you can see for sure. It just kind of appears. It's really fast. And that's the strength of these models, is that when they're open enough to be hosted in these different ways, you can do crazy things. And the Llama shape of models is something companies like Grok have tuned for really closely. I see people saying Quasar Alpha is similarly fast. No, it is fast, but we're talking about a massive gap here. That's not even close. Or if we switch to other top lab models like 4.0 Mini, which we have the fastest deployment of possible, it's still notably slower, less than half the speed. I just cleaned up the UI on Artificial Analysis Bit so we can break this down. I love this site so much. It's made comparing models comically easy. And you'll start to see why people aren't that impressed. Llama 4 Scout here, 43 compared to generally much better numbers as we trend upwards. And it is really fast, but so is Gemini 2.0 Flash. And Gemini 2.0 Flash is roughly the same price too. It's hard to justify Scout. And when we look at this as a price to performance chart, you'll see why I'm so confused. The UI is a little broken because the names are just overlapping in weird spots. It's hard for me to understand what the role of Llama 4 is, because Llama 4 Scout is slightly worse and slightly more expensive than Gemini 2.0. And Maverick is slightly more expensive and just barely better. It's just when you look at Gemini Flash, It's hard to understand the role of Llama beyond a pretty good small open model. It's no longer groundbreaking in any way, which is concerning because I know Meta's focus right now is trying to rush their way to get to state of the art. This chart also looks a hell of a lot funnier if we change which models are shown in it. As you see, 4.0 mini just doesn't make sense anymore with the state of these small models. Watch what happens when you add a 1. Pretty funny, right? Like we're in such a cheap world here that one button press breaks everything. It also, if we go in here and we turn off 4.0 and Claude, which are the expensive models that we have selected, this chart gets much more interesting. O3 Mini and DeepSeek R1 are the only things that fit in this top left quadrant, which is best price to performance. We're in a weird spot now. If you limit this window to be like the things that make sense, it shows such a strange shift because it looked very different even just a few weeks ago. Things are changing fast, and it's very interesting to see. It's even more interesting when we look at the output speed chart here, because I got much faster speeds on Llama 4. I don't think they're using the Grok with a Q deployment for artificial analysis here, which is why they're seeing slower numbers there. But you see how absurdly fast Gemini 2.0 is, and also O3 Mini to its credit. Hopefully these charts have helped highlight why I'm confused about this model. And once I saw the changes to the license, I got even more confused. Companies with more than 700 million monthly active users must request a special license from Meta, which Meta can grant or deny at its sole discretion. You must prominently display built with Llama on websites, interfaces, documentation, etc. Any AI model you create using Llama materials must include Llama at the beginning of its name. So if you create a distillation on top of Llama, you can't do R1 parentheses Llama distilled. You have to do Llama parentheses distilled on R1. You must include the specific attribution notice in a notice text file with any distribution. You must comply with Meta's separate accessible use policy. And limited license to use Llama name is only for compliance with the branding requirements. So you can't use the Llama name unless you're using it specifically to fit their brand requirements. Annoying. The 700 mil MAU number is high enough that this doesn't affect almost any of the people who will be using this, but it is still a scary enough thing that the likelihood people invest heavily into this model is less so. Very interesting. Curious to see how this ends up going for people. The choice to only compare with Flashlight and other outdated models hurts. The lack of compelling demos I've seen hurts. The license change hurts. But at the same time, Meta is still the biggest company betting hard on and going all in on open source. They are kind of like what Google was in the mobile race, where they went all in on Android, betting on the open platform versus the Apple closed ecosystem. They're trying to position themselves similarly with AI, where they're betting against OpenAI, which is, funny enough, a closed ecosystem. I do still hope genuinely that Meta finds success even with these models, because the Llama line has changed how open source AI works. And I don't think we would have seen innovations like we have with DeepSeek if it wasn't for the genuine groundbreaking work that has been done at Meta. I am hopeful that the rumors aren't true. It seems like they aren't, but I am very much hoping that is the case. And hopefully as well, fingers crossed, we will both see better performance from these models that are already out in the near future, and Behemoth will drop and blow us all away. The future is more exciting than ever, but I don't think Llama 4 is the future. Let me know what you think, though. Is the drama overhyped, or is this model really not that great? Try it on T3 Chat and let me know. Until next time, peace, nerds.